Hi, I'm Sarah Keenlyside and I'm the founder of the Bespoke travel company. We've been organising luxury trips in China for 10 years now. And today it's my job to answer some of the biggest challenges of selling China tourism. So what I want to do today is take 4 issues, the ones that I think are the most likely to come up when selling the destination, and then address them one by one. So the first thing I want to do is actually start with a quote, because I think this quote is a key reminder for anyone who's toying with the idea of coming to China but maybe still has some reservations. So it might be a bit cliche, it might be a quote that you've heard before from Mark Twain, who says, "Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry and narrow-mindedness." And I think it's a sentiment that in relation to this destination in particular, more than any other in the world right now, it's something that is crucial to keep in mind. So I hope you'll have that at the forefront of your mind as we talk through these issues. These 4 challenges in some ways are not so much challenges as misconceptions or misunderstandings or even myths about China. So I hope through this presentation you will understand what the reality is by the end. So the first that I want to tackle is the idea that tourists might not be sure whether China is for them at this moment. And what I want to remind you, because I think it's been forgotten, is that it's more important than ever for travellers to see places for themselves and to remember what China is all about and what China was known for, because none of that has changed, actually. Just a reminder, China is a country that has 2,000 years of continuous history and culture, and there is simply no other country in Asia that has more UNESCO World Heritage Sites, wonders of the world, cultural activities, incredible wildlife, unbelievably Instagrammable landscapes, and an incredible food culture as well. So in addition to all of the things that you already know but may have forgotten, the Chengdu Panda Sanctuary, for example, these amazing Chinese giant pandas, but also the Great Wall of China, the mysterious Forbidden City, one of the world's most incredible archaeological discoveries in the Terracotta Army. We all know about these things. They're all still here. They haven't changed. If anything, they've got better. But China also has an incredible array of hidden gems, and it's a huge country. It's got lots of parts that a lot of people don't even think of. So from, magical Tibetan monasteries in Yunnan province to Guilin's karst landscape, which honestly I challenge you to find a place that looks more like paradise, to Shanghai, which has some really fascinating, very characterful Art Deco architecture from the 1930s. It's one of the few cities in the world that has this much Art Deco architecture and so many good examples. So there's plenty of hidden gems in China, as well as the big hitter sites. I also want to talk about the food culture, because I think sometimes people are a little bit afraid of the food, and I was one of those people when I first came to China in 2005. I was a fussy eater, and I was afraid that I was going to be asked to eat all kinds of weird and wonderful things when I got to China, but I couldn't have been more wrong. The cuisine is so diverse and so delicious, and it's so different than what most of us think Chinese food is, coming from the West. And so I think for anybody who's a foodie, again, you'd be hard pressed to find another destination that has such a wide variety of different foods. There's a couple in this presentation that are my personal favorites that you might not think of in association with Chinese food. One of them is this fried goat's cheese from southwestern Yunnan province. It's always a massive hit with our clients. It's the surprise cuisine that nobody has ever really heard of. But once they come to China, they become slightly obsessed with. To the spicy, chewy noodles of Shanxi province, these are two favourites that are dear to my heart and that I'm slightly obsessed with. And what we find is that clients that come here always end up finding a new favourite dish, and then they get frustrated when they can't find it back home. I also think it's worth addressing the pollution issue here as well, because it's something that I still hear some pushback on sometimes from travel agents that we work with, especially travel agents whose clients have small children. And so I want to clarify where China is at with this now, because I think a lot has changed since people last heard about it. In actual fact, since China's war on pollution, which began in 2013, they've reduced dangerous particles in the air by 85%, which is just quite incredible. And I think for someone who lives here, that's borne out by our experience on the ground. So it used to be that if there was a blue sky day, everybody would remark on it because it was kind of rare. Now it's the opposite, the complete opposite. If there's a polluted day, that's what people remark on because they're so few and far between. So things have changed a lot, and don't just take my word for it. The Deputy Executive Director of the UN last year said of Beijing in particular that no other city or region on the planet has achieved such a feat in terms of reducing the pollution, the result of an enormous investment of time, resources and political will. So my message here is don't let some sort of now unfounded fears of pollution in China deter you from what will certainly be a trip of a lifetime. As I said at the beginning, China already has, still has all of these incredible places, and that hasn't changed, and you don't have to worry about the pollution anymore, so don't let that deter you. The second challenge that I want to talk about is the concern some Western tourists may worry that China is not welcoming. And so I want to share my experience here, which is that in the entire 10 years that we've been doing this, we've never had clients have anything other than a brilliant experience, a really warm reception, and that's the honest truth. More than that, I think what people don't realise is that the locals here are desperately sweet and welcoming to foreigners, and very curious about them. More often than not, they want to practice their English with you, which is a really nice thing that helps with engagement. I think there are very few countries in Asia where people will come up to you and maybe start a conversation and try to learn more about you. And that's a really lovely thing. That's quite a unique thing. I also think that quite often in China, people, there's the local Chinese population, and then there's the foreigners and the tourists. And actually all foreigners tend to be seen as foreigners, and sometimes that's also a good thing, because I think people aren't distinguishing between different nationalities. It's just about the fact that you might have something to teach them and they might have something to tell you, and so the exchanges are one of the nicest things about China. Also in the big cities, honestly, I think you can quite often be met with indifference these days, because Beijing, Shanghai, Xi'an even, these are cities that are really cosmopolitan and international, and they've seen many foreigners, and so it's not that exciting. However, when you go to the countryside or you go to some of the smaller cities in China, you can almost be treated like a celebrity. I can't tell you how many family photos I've been in, how many small babies I've had thrust into my arms for a photo. Even just 3 weeks ago, here in Beijing, I was in Beihai Park, and a young guy in his 30s came up to me and said, "Oh, do you mind having a picture taken with my father, because you'd make his day if he could have a picture taken with a foreigner while he's visiting Beijing? And I said, of course. He said all this in perfect English, by the way. So it's little interactions like that I think really demonstrate what the reality is on the ground. The third challenge I want to talk about is tourists who maybe aren't sure whether China is a safe place for them to travel to. And again, the reality is that China is one of the safest places in the world, not just from a crime point of view, but right now also from a COVID-19 point of view. So to address the more general safety issue in China, due to China's harsh punishment of criminals, it's always been an incredibly safe place to travel in, especially for foreigners. And I think maybe the only real issue that they might ever need to worry about is pickpocketing at a crowded train station. Something that honestly I've never had happen to me, but it's something that I think is a really big reason to travel here. And one example would be Beijing's hutongs, which you see on my slide here, at night. And these are ancient alleyways that are very maze-like and labyrinthine. And I think on the surface of it, they might seem a little bit risky to walk around at night, but the opposite is actually true. It's a really charming neighborhood. It's always brought to life at night. There's always kids playing and neighbors gossiping and small restaurants and bars that are open, people pacing back and forth to communal bathrooms and things. I can't tell you how nice it is to be able to walk around dark alleyways at night and not have to worry as a female. And as someone that came from London, that's something that you really appreciate, because obviously in London you have to make sure you're in the right neighborhood and not too late at night, and that's just not something that's an issue in China. And so more than it being safe, I would argue it's one of the safest and most relaxing places for independent travelers or families or female solo travelers to come. I think the other person that I want to talk about is this little chap that you see on the right. His name is Connor, and he was one of our clients last year in October. He came with his mum and dad, and he was in the Forbidden City. One minute he was there, and the next minute he wasn't. And it's every parent's worst nightmare, right? Especially in a spot where you have something like 80,000 visitors a day. And so of course they panicked, but within 15 minutes, the staff in the palace had managed to locate Connor and return him to his parents. And where was he? He was sitting on a step chatting to some grandmas, some Chinese grandmas, who found him very amusing because he was practicing the Chinese that he'd learned, the Mandarin he'd learned in school in America. But I think that it just shows what kind of country China is. Not only were they very efficient, the staff were really great at coordinating through WeChat, the ubiquitous app that everyone has in China, to communicate and get him back to his parents. But I think it also speaks to how much China loves children, how friendly it is to foreigners, and just how organized these places are. So again, I think it's really important to not be concerned about things that really aren't an issue, and in some cases the opposite being true. And then in terms of COVID, I think China has gone really hard on prevention and on test and trace, and their ability to get this pandemic under control in a country of 1.4 billion people is really quite incredible. And therefore I would argue that in a post-pandemic world, or even when borders open again and people are allowed to travel here, people are going to realize that China is probably one of the safest destinations for exactly this reason. And then finally, I want to talk about tourists or clients who might think that China is still underdeveloped or difficult to do. The reality is that this simply isn't true, and it hasn't been for many years now. So I want to talk you through a couple of examples that will really bring home that fact, hopefully. So the first is that, just to paint a picture for you, everything from a dinner at Hai Di Lao, this restaurant that you see on your screen now, that the kitchen is completely manned by robots, and little robots bring you your dinner. There's also regular human wait staff, otherwise it would be a bit frustrating. Super fun for kids. And share bikes, the dockless share bike system in China that has been that actually originated here and is super easy to engage with and to just jump on a bike. You know, it's these little things that don't only show you kind of what the future looks like, but also are really fun for families. I can't emphasize that enough. You know, when I came here in 2005, things were very different. It was pre-Olympics, and a lot of things were being built, but China is currently the most accessible, the most convenient, and the easiest it has ever been for foreigners to experience. And it's also one of the most high-tech countries in the world, and that's evidenced through, I think, the fact that the majority of the population uses their phones for everything. I think that's something that always surprises our clients. Most of the big cities are virtually cashless. It's a virtually cashless society now. And just to look at a couple of the statistics here, penetration of WeChat, the do-it-all app that everybody has in China, you know, it's like Skype and Facebook and WhatsApp, all combined. Penetration among 16 to 64-year-olds is 78%, which is just incredible. And you've only got to look at the numbers of people that use their phone to pay for things on a monthly basis, and you'll also realize just how high tech and that China is. And it's not just young people, as you can see. The other thing I wanted to draw your attention to is this share bike culture, which is something that you'll see in the big cities and which is something that you can engage with when you come here. It's now the third most popular form of transit in China's cities, and I think that's something that's probably also speaks to the lack of pollution these days. And finally, something that's even more helpful to foreign tourists is the fact that China has this insanely advanced high-speed rail network now. It far exceeds that of any country, including Japan. It has 22,000 miles of track, and it has a 98% punctuality rating. China also debuted the world's first maglev train. That was a while ago in Shanghai, between the airport and the downtown, which is a train that levitates on magnets. And it also just debuted this year the fastest driverless bullet train ahead of the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics. So all of this is to say that to get around this huge country, not just affordably, but cleanly, efficiently, and frankly stylishly, is easier than it's ever been. And I'm not entirely sure that's what people realize or expect until they come here. The final thing I think our clients are often surprised by is how many of China's young people speak English. Everybody learns it in school, and as I mentioned earlier, people are often quite keen to engage and use that English. But of course, the majority of people in the countryside or outside the big cities still only speak very basic English, and that's why it's really important to have a great tour guide, which is obviously something we work really hard to help people with. The final challenge or misconception that I want to address is the idea that you might not be able to find a good tour guide here who will not use a kind of rehearsed spiel or be told what to say. Again, the opposite is true. Bespoke has operations in other countries around Asia, including Japan, and what I can tell you with certainty is that Chinese tour guides are young and fun and eloquent and open-minded and very ready to speak their mind. And they're just some of the most fun, engaging people I've ever met. And so that's another reason that people should absolutely come here, because you won't only see for yourself just how impressive China is, and how wonderful the culture is and how much it's got to offer from a food perspective and so on, but there are people here on the ground that are just dying to show it to you and to change your mind, because I think a trip to China won't just change your perspective, it can also change your life. So I really hope that you will come and visit us, and that you'll be able to use some of the things that I've told you here, hopefully busted some myths and told you a bit more about the reality of life here and a trip here, and come and see us soon.